Welcome to the S2 Cognition Podcast. S2 is the official cognitive evaluation in sports, from youth to pro, where athletes and coaches build to win.
Welcome to the S2 Cognition Podcast. I'm your host, Harrison Hunter, and today Brandon and I are joined by LSU's Director of Performance, Jack Marucci. Yes, a first-time repeat guest on the show, and in this episode, we discuss the integration of cognitive science and performance metrics in sports, particularly football. He emphasizes the importance of eye tracking, data-driven player development, and the evolution of coaching practices to adapt to modern challenges. Marucci also shares his insights on how cognitive processing impacts quarterback performance and the significance of character in player success. We also highlight Jaden Daniels and all the things that he was able to accomplish and the player development that went into him and what he did in between his second to last year and last year at LSU. He also highlights the role of technology in training and the importance of building relationships inside the sports industry. For those that are new here, welcome. We're excited to have you today, and those that are returning listeners, we always appreciate your support. To help us continue our growth, we ask that you subscribe, rate, review the show. Thanks again to Jack for taking the time to join us. Hope you guys enjoy. LSU's Director of Performance, Jack Marucci, actually our second repeater guest. Thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
I appreciate having me. Like I said, thinking about it, I probably should have been on there 3 or 4 times as much as we worked together and all the things that we've been able to uncover as the years have gone on since, I think, 2015. So
8 seconds in, we're already getting roasted. But yes, you are. We probably should have had you a couple times. But since we last spoke, and before we get into cognition and what you found and all these really cool, unique things you've done, LSU baseball, right? 2 and 3 years, champions again. What role did you and Mario and the staff have? How cool is it to be around? What are some of those unique findings you're finding for baseball? We just had Jamie Tutko on the podcast not a couple months ago, actually during this little run, which was really cool. And I know you and Jamie are tight. But yeah, just kind of go into that before we get started.
Yeah, I think obviously you guys have worked with them and with the S2 and I think there's a big piece there that's been very valid as far as, looking at some of the traits of the player. And you marry that up with the performance, right? And I think they have definitely see the correlation. And I think that's probably one of the bigger things. And look, as you guys come down and work with them, we're always trying to help them too if they need some interpretation on some things. So it's nice to have, both parties kind of working in sync to, explain the data. Maybe there's some situations that they may want to use it a little bit more in a technical sense. So it has been fun to see how that, team has developed. And, you got to give the coaches credit, right? I mean, you guys have worked with people that maybe don't see a value in, giving them this type of information, or we even talk about the data that's provided from our department, but you really enjoy working with people that do, and it just even makes you that more, I think, hungry, and you want to keep, deep dive into what other areas that we could probably help them in. We have helped them in the past. We have looked at eye tracking and from the eye dominant side, we've had some great tools that we can look at that. Working with Mike Mann, who's in the process right now developing another system. He's working, with a couple guys, Nick Swisher, one of them.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to continue to look into that and look at the way these guys can track the baseball coming in. And I think that's been something that we've been able to evaluate. And there, again, there's a strong correlation with that. It's funny how all these things come together, how they all do kind of relate, because one data set, now it matches the other data set. And that's how you try to build out that formula. So when you find a elite player or high-end player, and I think that goes in with all sports. And I think we found that also from the football side also. So I think there's a strong correlation, and you guys, commend on how you guys have developed the system. And the other big part, look, you are not afraid to tweak it. And we all know as we go through these processes that the good ones look, they'll say, we don't need to keep doing it this way. Maybe this is the best way to score it. Maybe this is a better way to see it. Maybe we need to bring in this type of, add this to the battery or take this out of the battery. And I know you guys have done that because, looking at I think the 2015 first test, which had great traits on it, but it does look different. But that's a tribute on what you guys have been able to do. You're not just stuck in, living off your past laurels. You just keep kind of growing with it.
Jack, I want to touch real quick. You brought up an excellent point about the eye tracking and just really being able to work across all sports. There are a number of sort of eye companies, evaluation pieces out there. And I think oftentimes we get confused with, that being cognition or all of those elements. I think it actually, a lot of what you guys are doing from the eye perspective, eye tracking, those kinds of things fit in. It dovetails really nicely into what we do, right? So once the eyes take in that information, how does the brain interpret that? How quickly can interpret it? How does it make sense of it? And how does it sort of lay a representation down for future use, like this motor control element that we measure? Can you just talk to us a little bit about what you've been finding? What are some like really cool things that are a part of the eye tracking, the eye dominance piece? And then maybe we can actually dig in a little bit into how that fits into what we measure and how those things work well together.
Yeah, I think, Brandon, I think you're dead on that. I mean, think about it. A third of that test, is going to be looking at how your visual system works, right? There's a perception speed. There's how you search and how you track. I mean, think about that. Those things, that's why I always say it's eye-hand coordination. If you close your eyes, you're really not going to be too effective. So your eyes are going to tell you what the hands are going to do. It's not the hands telling the eyes what to do. Yeah. And then you learn from different pieces with the eyes. The right hand, left hand doesn't always dictate the direction that player may want to turn. And so I think these are things just over experience that we have found that out. So we start looking at correlations with wide receivers, for example. There are elements that you guys have identified that correlate with some of the pieces that we've been able to find. And I think that, again, puts that puzzle together a little bit cleaner. I think if you look at, and look, we've been very blessed here with some great receivers, and we just did a data sheet on them. And to kind of give you an idea, what you guys have been working with and what we have been working with is that if you take our wide receivers and look at since 2012, and let me lay it out flat. There's a 1.6% chance you have a chance to play in the NFL if you play collegiate Division I football. If you start 5 games here, name the starter at LSU, you have a 71% chance to play. Yes, it is a phenomenal number.
Wow.
And and if you have 10 starts named as a starter, you have an 81%. And I think since 2012, our guys have made over $500 million. So when you start looking at these, so we have the data set, you guys have it. So we know what an elite, and look, there's a commonality with all these guys.
Oh yeah.
That's the other part that we found. And so a lot of times, even on the eye stuff that we even go a little bit further on, we do try to put guys in positions that may be a little bit unique to just a normal line of guy up on one side versus the other. So those are things that we have tried to also develop into putting guys in the right situations, especially for money plays, as we would call it. I was talking to Joe Brady at the Combine, and who coached here on our 19 team, and he says he still uses that philosophy. So, but again, you have some of these organizations that, and he also understood the S2 because we had it here. So now you have someone that's trying to put, again, all these pieces together to make it work. So, when we talk about tracking and we talk about, how these receivers become these high-end guys, I will go back to say there's you start pulling out these correlations here. And look, we also learned some of the stuff on the S2. And that's why I think people have a misunderstanding on it. Remember, this isn't how many you get right or how many you get wrong. We're also trying to build out what fits that team, right? What fits that offense. So really, it's a tool to make the coaches better, to make the players better. And it gives us a little bit more clear on, are we putting them in the right position? So I think that's really a big part of what we try to do to correlate things with the information. Because look, you can have information. Are you applying it the right way? Are you having tools just to say you have them? And you guys know that in the past, there's been probably teams that have it. Did they use it? Maybe not. But, we learn a lot of times that you have all this technology, and are you really using it? And are you really applying it?
Well, that's one thing I think is really cool about what you guys are doing. And I don't want to step too much onto what we want to talk about later, but this deconstruction process of looking at the end result, which is success, right? You talk about those receivers. Let's deconstruct all the things that make them really successful. If you're looking at character, physical traits, coaching, processing, and look at all those individual areas of success and find what builds that model to be successful, right? You're deconstructing to then be able to predict. And I think that's what I want to talk about in terms of, okay, when you're weighting things into understanding all the different metrics of success, when you're looking at cognition and physical traits and character, how are you able to, based on what you've seen with successful players, you had a lot of them walk through the building.
Right.
How have you been able to parcel that?
So we've done, we have a study, or we have a database, which is kind of an ongoing study. It has about 665 players in it since 2000, right? So you take all your recruiting classes as you stack them. Then we look at what star they were when they came in. What was their star rating? Maybe what were they ranked on another service? We look at demographics. Where were they from? We look at obviously by each position. Then what we like to do is take their career, and we can look at the production, so we can see maybe how many starts they may have had, how many quarters they have played, so we have a pretty objective number there on their production. And production isn't because how many awards they won, or it's did they play here, right? Did they give us time? Were they a starter? So and then we have a number there that we can grade them. Then the players that have left, which is 224 of them, that for whatever reason could have been disciplinary, or they feel like they didn't get a fair shot, or they really don't want to play anymore. Of that 224, then I'd say about maybe 55% transferred into another school that were only somewhat productive. So think about that. Only maybe half of them really. So we tracked when they went to these other schools. How much did they play? How many? I mean, same thing, same data points. Then we wanted to see, as our players, then as they moved on to the NFL, again, that 1.6%, there were still about 5% that played in the NFL from that population. Okay, so you still saw a 5%. But the interesting thing was, and this may change with the transfer portal, none of them signed a second contract that transferred.
Wow.
None of them. So then you looked at our players, which right now in the SEC, LSU has a 31% chance. So think about that. You have a 1.6. The LSU players have a 31% chance to get in the NFL. What we did notice out of our population, we have right now we have the most players since 2000 have signed a second contract. So there's a resiliency but I will contribute that to you guys giving us really great data there. If you look at that population, they have a certain characteristic traits based off of S2. Yeah. That is a given. That's really non-negotiable. And I think that's really the pieces that allow us to stack up. Then we look at the character of that player, and we base it off how they interact in this facility. We see how we'll have our students. We have, custodial workers. We have cafeteria workers. We have people that are on the ground floor that I want to know what's their evaluation of that player and how they deal with them. Then we have off the field markers that we look for. Then there's coaching pieces that we look for, how they humble themselves. And academically, look, what we're looking for, do you make your tutors? Do you go to class? Look, and that's an easy thing because that's a sign of discipline. They can get out of bed. They make their appointment, as we would say. That means they're making their meetings. So as it translates in their life. So we've come up with a metric, and what we have seen is that the character does matter. Look, it's our best players, and it's not hard to see when you see a Justin Jefferson who is an upbeat guy, who's a great team member, right? It's not really hard, and or a Grant Delpit or a Pat Queen. These are our better people. I mean, it's not like it's rocket science to say these guys weren't. Lloyd Cushenberry, the Titans told me he was the best all-around player on their team. Think about that. That's a center. He's not catching balls, but they're talking about work ethic. They're talking about, leadership. They're talking about, always being on time. He's a very, very good player. But so these things are the parts that made these championship teams up. It's not always we're getting seduced by the talent of the player. Yep. We have to look at these other intangibles because people should be able to evaluate if the guy's fast enough, the word twitch, right? That's the big, is he twitchy? Is he long? Yeah, look, we can see all that. But do you really know what's under the hood of that player? And these are the things that we were trying to, and that's why the S2 has become such a, I would put it as one of the main staples. If you don't have it, you're probably going to miss on some guys that, because we can't just say, oh, he's a high academic guy. Yeah, he does. That means he's going to be no, that's a whole nother element. Yeah, you have to have, someone that has some brain that can retain information. But I think the part is we've done it long enough, and it's really non-negotiable as we migrate through these pieces.
Jack, one of the cool things about the last few years, though, is that where we've always sort of envisioned this from day one in 2014 is how do we improve what we have? How do we develop these players? And I know there's some debate, or it's a hot topic right now, about whether colleges are truly developing these kids because of the transfer portal. You may get them for 10 months sometimes, but we've really sank a lot of time and effort in trying to understand how do we improve performance? How do we take an S2 profile and develop an athlete? Because that's really what we're here for, right? Is to make these athletes better, make the program better, make it more attractive, those kinds of things. Let's just talk from the beginning of some of those ways that, we've really moved the needle, if you will, with respect to development. How do you, that, because that's always going to be a question is, okay, what do we do next? So we've already got these guys on campus. I want to test my roster. Okay. Great. Now, what do we do with these data outside of saying, well, we can tweak the routes they run. We can do X, Y, or Z strategic adaptations to really, maximize what they do well and minimize sort of their weaknesses. But how do we develop this athlete?
I think it's a great question because our numbers look at now, and if you look at the early 2000s to probably 2012, even 13, 14, you kept players for up to 3.5 years to 3 years. Okay, so you have that. The last 3 years, you may have a player 2.2, 2.4 years. So you let's say we lost a year of development. I still believe that, look, it's like the NFL. When you bring rookies in, you sign them for a deal, you still got to develop them. Because you develop them on your philosophies, you develop them on your culture, develop them on other areas that maybe you can, depending on how they are coming out, route running, like you said. There's other elements that you can develop a player. Show them how to watch film. There's a lot of things that you can do. I think from our standpoint, we're still going to take a percentage of that's our free agents, right? You can do the needs. Why not? Right. Then there's still a certain population that we have. We figured out that'll still be the true, freshmen coming in. So there is still a developmental piece. Can you development a guy in 10 months? Yes, you can. You still can. You just have to be on a little bit of hyperspeed. That's why these tools help. That's why you need to know how to assess. It's even more important because if you're trying to figure out, can this guy play middle backer or would he be a better edge guy? Well, the data will probably give you those answers. You don't have to keep trying these, guys in different positions because you're losing time. That's something we can't get back. So this is the piece that can allow us to, crunch that time and give us an answer. So that makes a big, big difference. Then but you still have your population that you're still going to develop, right? So, and we know you develop as you get older. I mean, there's some things you can't speed up. We know how the brain matures, right? We know it's going to probably maturity goes all the way to 25, 26 years old. So why is it, if you look at the most productive quarterbacks that have transitioned into the league, the Penixes, the Burrows, you got Jane Daniels, Bo Nix, they're older guys. They're not guys that are coming out really early. They're not. So that's why, you have to be smart on how you're developing the program from that. So let's dig into a little deeper here. So Jane Daniels, as we mentioned, without the S2 data, we don't build the strategy out with the VR company, Cognize. We don't do it. And S2's cognition, the VR company is called Cognize. It's the same, right? We have to process. We can build speed. We can do all that. But really, the guys that are the most sustainable players and our most productive players have a cognitive way to process. They process at a very high level. But could we move the needle on these things? And I know, and I think we're starting to see maybe we can. You guys will give them a recipe, right? You have a recipe for each trait, and there's techniques that you can do. But Jane Daniels was the guy that, from a very high, he could process the game. But look, there's something that we identified that said, well, let's see if we can enhance the tracking. That's the anticipation of the throw. And sure enough, all of a sudden these things start clicking. I just did we have a big database with all these quarterbacks since 2016, and we're looking at guys, and we're trying to look at what quarterbacks have improved over the years. So we have a number that you get a value of, are you improving? Well, that number can change if you didn't improve the next year, but the next year, maybe your junior year you did. And so we have a value. Jane Daniels is arguably in the 99th percentile that has jumped from one year to the other. And if you talk to any NFL personnel, they never seen basically anything like that. So he basically went maybe from a 4th round draft pick to arguably could have been the first player taken. So how does that happen? I mean, especially at that position. Now, other positions, maybe a wide receiver didn't play as much. He got in there, but he's played 4 or 5 years, counting the COVID year. So without the data that you guys gave us, we would not have known truly what to attack. We wouldn't know. So you guys gave us the diagnosis, and I think they give us the prescription of what we need to do, and that's where the Cognize meshed beautifully. So the other thing I noticed, and I give you guys another big plus, I was looking at his data over the years, and you start looking at traits of these top quarterbacks. Ball accuracy is one of them. but he was in the, very low as a career. I'm going, man, it just doesn't
Jaden
seem
was?
right. Yes, it was very low
Interesting.
on ball accuracy until his last year. He jumped from the 30th to, he was like the 38th to 40th percentile. He jumped all the way up to the 90th his last year.
Right.
Well, again, I think doing all those reps and mental reps, it created accuracy, because it's not something like you can just go in the weight room and work. Or ball accuracy is completely different. Yeah, you can change your feet, but no one really changes that much. It really doesn't. It kind of is what it is. I think there's other quarterbacks. Josh Allen is probably another one that has really changed his, ball accuracy. But it's rare. Look, it's not something you can just take a quarterback, I'll fix that.
Right.
But how does it turn? He had the same receivers.
Right.
He had the same offensive line. I mean, everything was, you can't say we brought all these other guys in. Now, what creates ball accuracy, if you reverse engineering, if you have high cognitive wide receivers, because they create accuracy. They will hit their targets. If it's a dig or something, they can hit that 12-yard and bend it. That's the thing. They also know how to process the route running. So if you think about that, they create ball accuracy.
You're marrying it. Well, let me ask you this: it's got to be some sort of form of anticipation, right? When you're throwing more accurate balls, and you're throwing balls before guys are cut.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt.
So do you think some of this stuff was helping in that anticipation, right? He always had it in there.
Oh, yes, because I think it's the biggest part of the change. Because if you have a DB sitting here, right, you have a DB up here, receivers here, I want to put it in that gap so they can estimate where he's going to be and where the receiver is going to be. And now they can put it or hit a spot like on a long route or something. They can drop it in there. The anticipation of knowing where to put it, because cognitively, you know exactly what's going on.
So do you think if you put the 2022 anticipatory throws or some of these routes that he's throwing, you're saying if you put a side-by-side of 23, the ball's out earlier and to a better spot?
They've done it. So Joe Sloan shows a play. We're playing Ole Miss. There's a DB, and probably middle of the field, and they have two backers. You don't even see the receiver when he throws the ball because he's behind another player. You don't see it. And all of a sudden he appears and the ball goes boom. It's a great clip. It explains it. It's probably better than anything. Then just watch his head movement, how he's been able to scan. All of a sudden his head is just, and we know how important that is and how fast you can trigger that off. So, I think there's no doubt.
That's one. So in terms of then development from the quarterback position to then these other positions, right outside of the quarterback, how are you guys going to utilize this system to push forward in that development as well?
Well, I think we learned that how the running backs pick up the third down. There's not enough reps in the week. And then we know that if they do not pick up and they can't process that, I mean, look, that is a struggle. The quarterback's going to get killed. Kevin Falk played a long time. Darrell Williams played, for the Chiefs. These guys played. Joe Adai was very good at it because they could pick up the third down blitz. Or they know once they chip a guy, they know how to come out of the, and make an arrow route or swing route. So those things are really critical but again, we just don't get enough reps. So they have the capacity to do it. Data says they have the capacity to do it. You still have to see things. And again, you're marrying up. We know this guy's it's like playing middle backer, right? We had a coach this was during our national championship year, asking, can this guy, what do you think about, would he be better off the edge or in the middle? Well, this guy, his numbers look like he can play in the middle. And they wouldn't have thought about that because his body type didn't quite look like it. So sometimes we get based off their body type is where we want to put them on the field. Sure. And so I think, you really have to dive into in the information that's provided to the staff. And look, Joe Sloan, again, he loves the data that we give him, from the S2 data. Look, he's bought into these things.
Right.
And again, like we said earlier, when you have people vested into the tools that we feel like have an advantage for us, it just continues to keep digging and trying to find these solutions based off the information.
Yeah. And Brandon, we hear this, right? So here's my guy's overall profile. He's got high cognitive traits, but how do I get this? He has the Ferrari engine. How do I get him to drive it? I think the focus is the efficiency of how he's actually making in-game decisions. How do we link that up? And how do we get that to be showing on the field?
Yeah. And for Jack, I think one of the things when we were talking about Jaden, and especially with the VR, I don't want to get into Jaden's profile, and frankly, I don't remember what he scored on instinctive learning, but those are the kinds of things by doing those reps over and over again. When you have the opportunity to do it, you can turn sort of that implicit to explicit, right? And so you're starting to understand trends on the way your wide receivers move, on the types of decisions your receivers are going to make. You just don't have enough reps to do that frequently at practice when you're really focused from week to week on the next opponent. So being able to get those reps, especially at game speed, can really take that sort of cognitive hardware and fit it to what you need to do.
It is hard to get. I mean, think about it. You have maybe 4 days to truly prepare for a team. Right. And before you start going over the total game plan at the end of the week. So I think people think you have all this time, but even in the NFL, we went down to visit a couple clubs, and it's amazing how much non-contact they have with these players. I'm talking about like interaction. It's hard, man. I mean, and you think it's their job, they're getting paid for it, but my goodness, they get these little OTAs, but you can't go past a certain time. Right. I mean, it is hard. And look, our kids got to go to school, and they have all these other obligations. So it's not as much as you think it is. So you better find ways to maximize what they can do. And I think that's the other thing. We always talk about the Ferrari. Sometimes you're stuck in third gear. You never get to get it in top gear. So that's why you try to angle that so we can get in those higher gears.
I will say over the last, I don't know, what do you think, Harrison? It's probably been the last 3 or 4 years. There are definitely clubs in the NFL that have been super interested in, let's back up a second. Clubs have historically used us for the scouting piece to understand how guys are wired, to understand if they'll fit in their system. But now, we've drafted these guys. Can you guys help us over the next 3 weeks really develop a fine-tuned player development plan? How can we get this athlete up to speed in the building as quickly as possible? How can we set up even, as you know, a lot of these guys have personal coaches, off-season coaches. How can we set these guys up for success even before they get in the building? So it is, I think, in people's sort of headspace thinking about development. I know time is a huge limiting factor, but I do believe that it is moving towards that. And we always have recommended, because a lot of these guys do, especially the quarterback position, they have these professional coaches that they work with in the off season. How can we develop cognition in the off season and then maintain that during the year where you don't have to spend a ton of time focusing on it, but you can do maintenance work? And now we're starting to think about how do we marry all of that work into the system, right? And I know there's a handful of coaches, Harrison, we talk with John Beck frequently. John's now starting to do all of that off season work focused on that quarterback's particular offense, his particular scheme and system. So I think that we're moving that way. I do think, as most things in life, when we start to get anxious as the season comes up or whatever, we default back to what we used to do or old school ways of thinking. But I think it's moving in the headspace of, okay, we've got a limited time to develop them. Let's focus on development in that time frame.
Yeah, and I think it's how you construct your plan within that time constraint. It still can work. You just have to be a little more creative. You have to have the right tooling. You have to have the right, attitude of the player too, and the coaches. So it does work. And, anytime you have like the transfer portal, well, it's kind of exciting. Let's make it another challenge, right? Let's not complain about it. Hey, it's not the way it was.
It's here. Yeah.
It's here. So let's quit complaining about it. So it makes it even more challenging and more fun. I mean, let's dig into more of the things that you always adapt. You should be able to adapt. I think what happens with people as they get older, and I'm older, a lot of coaches, if they had success when they're young, right, a young coach, they kind of cling to that. That's what they keep reverting back to. Well, things aren't the same as it was that many years ago. So I always said the best people that have taken their experiences and keep growing with it, they're the ones that become dangerous in a good way. They become very productive, but it's harder to find that because people don't like change. That's just a normal, we all have routines when we get up in the morning. We probably have our keys somewhere. We have, maybe breakfast becomes the same bar or whatever, water. You have your own routine, right? And when someone knocks you off of it, oof, but that's part of that routine keeps you consistent. We know that.
Right.
But when you're knocked off of it, I want to know how that guy reacts. I want to know how they can react, when things can you readapt? Can you improvise, as we would say in the S2 world?
That's a really interesting sort of take, Jack. I mean, you've been in that one building for a really long time, and you were in some very successful buildings before that one. Not just the high level athletes you've seen come through these buildings, but coaches, right? And it was interesting. Just this morning on my social media, I saw, like, if you're my age, and I don't want to give away my age, but all of the coaches that were super successful in that time frame are no longer in college football. We've had a lot of stalwarts of college coaching retire in the last, and the portal is the number one reason that's cited for that. But talk to us about just the sort of the change in coaching you've seen over the last decade, or whether it's forced or not forced. I mean, I can give our opinion because we interact with a ton of coaches, and we have seen a dynamic shift in the way these guys are thinking about things. The number one thing we've always talked about is defensive coordinators are now becoming offensive guys because they know how to deconstruct a defense and things like that. But what do you see in these guys, especially some of these successful?
I've been very fortunate. I've seen Bobby Bowden, I've seen Don Nealon, Ray Perkins, Bill Curry, Les Miles, Nick Saban, Coach Kelly, Coach Orgeron. So I saw a lot of different styles, right? I've been very blessed to see 4 national championships, 4 different coaches. Yeah. So that was always a different, Now, there still are core things that you should do. Look, we talk about discipline. We talk about the core pieces. And that's when I start studying the character of these teams, the Warwick Dunn, the Derek Brooks, Charlie Ward, starting it off, right? Me and Harrison, we were at the Combine, and I told Warwick Dunn, that was him and these other players were one of the reasons why you study that. So how do coaches evolve, right? Well, and we were a part of a lot of this, the way we practice now. Mm-hmm. Did we truly need 2-a-days? Did we truly need that?
Right.
Well, the answer is no. Now, training camp, as they called it, because people probably didn't work all summer, or they put them back. So you had, the time crunch. Well, let's do two-a-days, get them in shape, because they haven't done anything since the off season. So that's the evolution. But we kept that two-a-day until we had to show data, and we did some sensors in the helmets and so on and so forth. So coaches have adjusted that. That's probably one of the biggest pieces that you've seen on the amount of contact. Now,
and
you can go
that was one of our first studies we did together, actually.
Yes. Yeah, we showed how some of your cognition can lower because of just the fatigue and the hitting and constant pounding. It showed it. I think it was, what was it, a 12% drop?
Yeah, 14% drop in impulsive mistakes and being distracted. And that was,
and that to me is something that had to be done. But some coaches fought it. Like you said, there's always going to be people who are going to fight that, or they're going to try to continue. We're going to make them soft and da-da-da. Again, there should be an element of you still have to get uncomfortable in camp. You can't just – football's different than any other sport. I think that's one big thing. I think – and the S2 helped us with this too. Here's a big evolution. Well, do we need to just sit there and watch film all the time? Do we need to sit there and watch film for an hour and 20 minutes? Well, we know some guys aren't wired that way. Well, let's evolve. Let's create. We had a big room that we can do the walkthrough room, right? We were one of the first to have that. That was Joe Burrow's staple. But that is one thing that has evolved. Now you see more interaction. I call it your applied learning. You're moving, you're touching, you're feeling, you're able to do something that, and we know a lot of the data. Think about it. How many guys are just truly, say, a visual learner and they can watch it? And there's going to be probably a higher population wants to do a walkthrough. I have a player, and I'm sitting here with a scout, and they're talking about something. And this player really helped answer a lot of questions. He goes, this was a transfer kid. And I always pick their brain, tell us what we need to do better, what you like there, what you didn't like, da-da-da-da. Because one thing I didn't like, he was a defensive player, and he goes, we would watch the film, and they expected you to go outside and know it. And all I'm thinking is I got anxiety. I'm thinking, I don't know it. Right. I'm going to get yelled at this whole practice because I'm expected just to see it and go. As an older coach, that's how they coached. This isn't that long ago, guys. This is within 5 years. And so he got here and he goes, oh my gosh, so we can do it this way? Yes, you can go out, maybe it's a walk, whatever term you use. Yeah. And it changed his whole perspective. He was more relaxed. He knew he wasn't going to get yelled at. He knew he was more prepared though, because you have different stages of just not sitting there watching film. We have a room that opens up into another area that you can do the walkthrough and blow the film up and interact. And I think that is something, again, the S2 had a big part in that, but that's another big component of how coaches have evolved, because you would never see that. It was, you're going to watch the film, you're going to go out on the field. And I think everybody's probably in the latter now. We're going to see more of that interaction. So I think those two components have really evolved. You do a lot of the mental training, and I think the coaches also allowing us, probably another huge difference, allow us to use this technology. We use TrackMan for our kickers now, and we go out once a week. We're working with a guy on our team that we're trying to develop. Maybe we want to develop a little better leg speed. We want to develop a little bit better ball speed coming off. Well, that tells us let's do some high, velocity training. Let's see if it's making an effect. But we also can show these guys, as soon as they make the kick, we have the video there. We can send them all the clips. We can start looking at the different techniques. Now it's better feedback. And it also will work with our quarterbacks. We also use a chip in our football. I mean, look, a lot of these coaches weren't going to allow us to do that before. They go, what's this for?
Get the chain gang.
Yeah, now we can see, are they having a decent spin rate that allows these guys to, are they in the elite phase of getting the spin, right? Maybe we have to change some techniques on that. Maybe it's finger pressure. How's the ball efficiency look? Over time, are we losing this? This is basically our catapult for the quarterback.
Yes.
Right.
Are we losing velocity?
Totally.
Or is their velocities too hard in these short routes? Well, look where your velocity is. Now we know what the sweet spots are. Guess what? After 10 practices, quarterbacks throw over 22,000 yards. I mean, no one really knew this stuff. So now we have to adjust some things. And I think coaches have to look at embracing the technology. Again, it's only going to make the player better and the coaching better.
And
it's like
what I love about those data too are they're reliable and great outcome measures. So if you're trying something with an athlete, so if you're going to try a distraction control drill or something like that, you can really see how those metrics are affected by including distraction, and then working on it for 6 weeks and then looking at it again, you doing pre-test, post-test. So those are awesome outcome measures.
So, some of the things you look at on quarterback play, well, there's different pressures a quarterback may face. You may get the peripheral pressure, right, that comes around, or the pressure up the middle. Usually the pressure up the middle is what affects the quarterback. Right? Well, let's take that and let's look at their accuracy. Let's see how much they're compromised. That's something you can see. So, and then you can change maybe some things on the distraction or change some things, how impulsive they are on it. So again, that's where the data helps.
Yep.
So, and does it match up on their performance data? Now, if you see that, now you're onto something.
Yep.
And that's why you can, change the outcome probably.
Love that. Okay. 3 random funny questions for you, Jack. Okay, so now we haven't talked about this in a while, but you have, in the last couple of years, you're a woodworker, right? You've been making some drumsticks. Yep. Do you still do this, and B, coolest experience with the drumsticks?
Still do. So I bought a drum set to learn how to play it, and
Janet, I bet, loves that.
I had to learn to. And I don't have any musical, but you rep it enough, and you have to disassociate that lower half. And
she pops in for dinner, and you're like, "Hey,
go to the garage, Jack." Yeah,
I did. I was in the garage, and it was so hot in there. I mean, it's like how it is down here in Louisiana. It's like we're living on the equator, and so you're sweating in there. My wife finally said, "All right, you can't stay there." So I went upstairs. So what it does teach you, how to the sticks, how they wear, what's the wear pattern. Then the lingo, the hi-hat, all the kick drum. And so probably the one that probably stands out is I had a call from a former Florida State player, and we're catching up, and it was a couple of years ago when I just started making them. And I tell him about the drumsticks. He goes, I know a drummer. I'm texting him right now. He goes, look, he's an older guy. He's and he goes, no, he'd love to have some. It was Mick Fleetwood of Fleetwood Mac. So I send the sticks out to him. I get a video back over a minute long saying he's one of the best sticks I've hit coming off the cymbal. It sounds better than anything I've used. He's in his little studio there, and then he just really, you could see the passion and how much he loves these drumsticks. So, and there's been a lot of interaction. We've had some people play here and sitting hours with these guys, and these are high-end drummers, and it's really neat to see something that taken from one product to another. There's a lot of commonalities. And, again, just listen to what they want. I don't think people listen enough.
That's true. Outside the drums is kind of a 2-part. What's the other coolest, I guess, can we say off the field for you, off the field project that you're working on?
I would say Well, we're in the process of house building. That was a interesting whole project that has consumed us. So we're probably a week away. And we did that because of two things. The upstairs will be an insulated room so the drums won't echo. And there's a wood shop attached to it.
Yeah,
So
you finally get a wood shop.
Those right there are probably the biggest deal. That now I can make some decent cutting board. You have more room, right? Yeah. Making the cutting boards and doing all these different, aspects of that. But we're also working with a couple companies. One is called Sweet Spot that does a lot with pickleball. They also have it's more to bring it back to the backyard sports. We had this wiffle ball field in our backyard, early 2000s. And it's funny how now all of a sudden people you see on YouTube video, everybody's playing wiffle ball now. They never saw wiffle ball. Now people have wiffle ball fields. And so I think, that's kind of neat to see that evolution. So it's been a great company working with Curtis Cruz and Joe Lawrence, who was our original partner. But it's a really neat company that is trying to bring back the backyard sports. And
love it.
I think it's just a pretty neat concept that we're working with. I guess that's a little bit more sport related.
That's okay. Play outside, baby. That's the big thing, right? Play outside. How? Last question. How many stadium seats do you have behind you? How many are in your office?
Just back here.
Yeah.
And this isn't all of them, but all right, you got Three Rivers Stadium.
Are you going to show us? Here we go. Don't rip your camera.
Just
there we go. Okay.
Now, that's the gray one's Forbes Field, 1909. Okay. Now, we grew up around Pittsburgh, so you're going to have that's Mellon Arena's the orange one. That was put in probably late 60s when they built the stadium. Now, back here you can see.
I got a green one. Yep.
The green one's Wrigley Field, and then you got Fenway Park.
Oh,
the blue one right there.
Fenway Park and Wrigley.
Yeah, then you're going to scan over it, and that's Three River Stadium when you get into there.
Okay, so which one's your favorite?
Well, I'd say probably the Forbes Field,
the 1909.
The original Pittsburgh with the Steelers, and then you got Baltimore, the gray one, the old Municipal.
Yes.
Then you have Yankee Stadium there. Then in the other back area, then you have the old Cleveland Municipal. Then you have Comiskey Park, then Rosenblatt is all the way, that yellow seat that you see.
It's funny. Every time I think you're about to be done telling me, you have like three more.
And not to mention there's plenty more in a storage shed.
I don't know.
You just go out there with your drill and say, "Hey, I'm Jack Marucci. Hank, just ignore me."
No. People have sent me these over time. No, I haven't.
He's driving out. Yeah.
I'm just here to repair the seats.
The old Ted Williams seats now in your office.
Yeah. So, and it's pretty neat. You get these things given to you, as you see in here. And probably one of the neatest things we did, Dan Quinn, he's the head coach of Washington now, but probably one of the best. I always felt like he was one of the best people in the game. And we did some motivational bats. They were playing a Monday night game, and he wanted to send me some. I said, I don't need anything. And so he ended up sending me a game ball, but there's a signature on there.
Phil Niekro.
Oh, yeah,
it's baby. Phil Niekro, the Hall of Famer that played for the Braves. I guess he lived near their complex, and it's probably one of the neatest things I got. So,
yeah. You never let me throw that one around. That's okay. I understand.
And did he play for the Pirates, Niekro? No,
he never played for the Pirates.
Dude.
No, he was a Brave.
That's awesome. You got so many things in your office that are so much fun.
So there's
I'm
a story with everything that's been given. I think that's kind of bleachers from Lambeau Field. You help somebody all the way to. There's the balls Cal Ripken they used in the last couple games with his streak. So he was here. He came down with his daughter. She was looking at vet schools, but he wanted to see the complex. So you talk about an analytical brain. That is an analytical brain.
That's awesome.
And I think it's come out now how he used to call the pitches with certain catchers, and I had him tell the story to tell our offensive coordinator. We had lunch here or dinner here in the building. So, but he's a pretty neat guy. But as you go through this journey, it is still about relationships. If you don't have it, and that's why I've enjoyed working with you guys because you understand with the relationship piece, and you've been able to tap into that. It's not just a very generic relationship because you want to have that relationship. So it just makes the product better because now as we understand it, and you guys have taught us about it, we have become a lot more efficient. And but that's because of that relationship, and there's always been a very good relationship. And I think that's how the good products, as I knew through the baseball bat world, that's why it was different. It was the relationships. So
appreciate you saying that, Jack.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important part, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. You see all these new companies coming out, and they want to come out and charge you these because they think everybody has all this money because they're pro or college. Well, college has just lost a lot of money. Let's go back to the players. So you better be wisely on how you do it. And you guys have dealt with the NFL. It's not like they just throw the money out. I mean, they're going to. So you have to have a really good product at a really good price point to make it effective. And I think, obviously you guys have figured that out.
Oh, yeah. LSU's Director of Performance, Jack Marucci, first repeater podcast guest. Thanks, man, for jumping on. Appreciate your time today.
Yeah, you got it.
Thanks for listening to the S2 Cognition Podcast. If you like the content we're putting out, please subscribe with that plus sign at the top of your app, leave a review about the episode, and share it with a few friends. You can follow us on Twitter at S2 Cognition and Instagram at S2.cognition. If you'd like to get in touch with the program or show, please visit our website at s2cognition.com/podcast. Thanks again for listening to the S2 Cognition Podcast. I'm your host, Harrison Hunter, signing off for now. We will talk to you soon.